Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365. That's John McMullen. I'm Zander, Krause, back here wrapping up the final touches on that tough Monday night game and looking ahead now to the Week 3 matchup for the Philadelphia Eagles, the New Orleans Saints. Eagles are traveling to New Orleans for a 1 o'clock game this Sunday. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Thursday morning, my man?
Getting ready, trying to turn that page. Think about the most explosive team in football after 2 weeks. But hey, you can only talk about what's been played, and the Saints have looked very good early in the season.
Yep, no doubt about it. I did watch some of that Saints, watch some of the Saints tape yesterday in terms of where they are. They do have some explosive players, over there. We're going to get more into that game, obviously, but a couple guys there you got to keep your eye. It's really the three big guys there for me: Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, and then Rashid Shaheed, who really tore apart the Cowboys on a couple big plays last week. So they got a couple good players over there on offense, Johnny Mack, and then obviously that good defense. And for anybody who's been listening to the show all summer, you did bring up that defense. They got a lot of good guys on that defense. So it should be a tough test this weekend, especially coming off a loss, a tough loss on a Monday night, a short week. But hopefully Eagles are prepared and getting back on that. We talked about the scheduling. They're not really on the right schedule, at the start of the year here with the Friday and the Monday. So this is going to be their first.
Part of the reason BLG's on, because we don't know what day it is.
Yeah, right.
It was supposed to be on yesterday. It'll be on today. But yeah, I'm with them because I didn't remind guys because I forget what day it is. Nick Sirianni talked about it last week. He said, on Thursday, he said, talk to any coach and they'll argue with you all day. It's Wednesday because you put it in your mind
right
of a typical NFL week. So, yeah, it has a bigger impact than people realize, I think. But, yeah, I mean, nobody cares. You win or lose, but it does have a bigger impact. And the NFL doesn't care because if somebody writes that big check, they're getting a Monday night game and a Thursday night game and a Friday night game. And it's just the way it is. So you got to persevere the best way possible.
Yep, no doubt about it. The coach is still on a Wednesday. So as Johnny Mac pointed out there, we got a great show planned for everybody. We're going to have Brandon Lee Goutland in hour number 2 today. Johnny Mac mentioned that. He missed with us yesterday, was catching up probably on some Z's after a late Monday night game, working late into the night. The beat reporter. So we'll get Brandon Lee Goutland in hour number 2. Here in hour number 1, we're going to put our final touches here on this game. That was Monday Night Football, and then we're going to start to preview what's to come this weekend, how the Eagles can bounce back, really, I think, mostly defensively, and then we'll also get the update from John on where everything is. Injuries. John, let's start there. You were down at the NovaCare Complex yesterday. Any new news coming out of there? Any updates on the injury front? Will A.J. Brown be back this week? It doesn't look like it, at least from the outside. Did you learn anything on the inside you can update us with?
Yeah, I don't expect him to play this week. And the Eagles had a walkthrough yesterday, so it's more of an estimation, not more of an estimation. It is an estimation. Did not practice in the walkthrough, which is not a good sign because, in theory, with a hamstring, you might be able to handle a walkthrough, but not the actual practice. So they'll be out there today practicing a regular practice. I don't expect to see him. Johnny Wilson also was estimated as a DNP with a hamstring, and he was sort of 50-50 for the game on Monday, managed to go. And we'll see about him. I think that's more likely a 50-50 shot. I don't think you're going to see AJ this week. And but that's it, so that's a big one. But otherwise, the team is pretty healthy. The 53-man roster. So as best you can be, only 2 names. You see some of the injury reports around the league, and they're growing. So the Eagles have stayed relatively healthy. Unfortunately, the one guy hurt is their best player. So.
Yeah, is a very key guy. So not in a good position there. Hopefully AJ can get back healthy. Everybody wants him to rest up. But, it doesn't seem like this was just a tightness, John. I mean, if you're missing 2 weeks,
no, that goes
I mean, it's got to be something a little deeper than that, right?
Yeah, it's obviously a hamstring strain, which is not the worst injury of the world, but a little bit worse for a wide receiver than, say,
Right.
an offensive lineman or even a defensive tackle, something like that. So you have to be really careful with those types of guys, as opposed to maybe somebody can, a lane or somebody might fight through it. You really can't do that because receivers obviously have to open up pretty consistently in one full speed. So, yeah, difficult injury. They're not the same team when he's not on the field, but it's what the NFL's about. You got to persevere, and the good teams find a way, because everybody goes through this type of stuff, and the good teams find a way to persevere.
No doubt about it. I want to welcome everybody in this morning. We got excited for the show today. The shows have been fun this week. Just kind of recapping everything. It was a tough loss on Monday, but definitely a lot of excitement, a lot of energy on the shows, which has been good. So thanks everybody in the chat. Appreciate all of you guys. Our Birds 365 faithful, Johnny Mac, is growing strong. They have been showing out all season long so far. So appreciate everybody in the chat. Hit that like button here early on. Johnny Mac, we're now 48. We're more than 48 hours. We're a couple days now removed from this thing. Where are you on that Monday night game? I know it's time to put it in the rearview mirror, but when things settle, the dust settles, the waves slow down a little bit. Where are you on that game? Did you have a chance to rewatch, catch some
Yeah,
tape,
I
film, and just
rewatched it.
any
I mean,
different takeaways now than you had immediately after?
no, I'm past that game now. I mean, yeah, that's what you have to do in the NFL, and
Yeah,
that's
you
what
got
the
to close
Eagles
the
have
book.
done, especially when you have a good opponent coming up. Yeah, I mean, nothing's changed from my thought process. I see both sides of the discussion about running the football versus what they did, but the bottom line to me ends up with a heck of a play call in the big spot, wide open receiver, execute the play. None of that is even a discussion. So, um, I don't think you should. I thought Mike Gill brought up a good point yesterday on the show. You shouldn't be angry about the coaches for trusting the players. If you don't trust the players, maybe be angry at yourself. Certainly one of your best players. If you can't trust Saquon Barkley, who can you trust? What are you down to, AJ? If you can't trust Saquon Barkley, so
Right.
I that part I don't put even a modicum of uh, importance on. It's ridiculous not to trust your best players in the biggest spots. That's what you're supposed to do. So I think the coaching staff, Kellen Moore's absolved with that play call. I think it was a good play call. But that's the old decision-making process that, just because you make a good decision doesn't guarantee a good outcome. So, and I think that's hard for people to wrap their heads around at times, but that's the reality. That's life. It's not always fair. And that kind of stuff happens. But the more you have wide open receivers to win games, the more games you're going to win over the long haul. So that's why I kind of absolved Kellen Moore. But I will say, and the most troubling aspect of this to me is off the field, and it has revealed just how tenuous this bullshit setup Jeffrey Lurie has unfurled on Philadelphia is, because one drop pass has revealed so much, with people blaming the head coach, blaming the offensive coordinator. What's going on? Should he overrule him? Can he overrule him? Analytics. Nick's talking about punching numbers into 20 different websites, and everybody knows how much Jeffrey loves analytics, and he disrespected the analytic crew. Just a tenuous boy. Jeffrey's one of the best owners in the NFL. That hasn't changed. You see David Tepper in Carolina, people like that. He's a great owner, but that doesn't mean he's a perfect owner. And this is a stupid setup. Stupid setup.
You're right. It did reveal a lot about that. And I think Eagles fans deserve better. And in a way, I think they're fed the same BS, and it's force fed down their throat. And people ask questions of, we're 2-7 in the last 9 games. And I know it's new coordinators this year, so you kind of have to separate it. But under Nick Sirianni, we've been trending in the wrong direction. Many fans want answers for that, and hopefully the Eagles can answer the call this weekend by getting back on track. But I do think you're right, John. I mean, the setup is brutal. What do you think forced, Jeffrey Lurie to go that route? And I think, one of the things that I've liked about Jeffrey Lurie in his time in Philly is he seems to make the right decision on coaches. And even now, like Chip Kelly, we would say was the one wrong one, but that's hindsight 2020. Like when we hired Chip, he won 10 games his first 2 seasons. It looked good at the time until he decided to blow the whole thing up. But, I just don't know what he did here with the coaching staff and why he went this route. Was it because they like Nick as a mouthpiece for the organization? Is it because he believes in Nick Sirianni? Like what forced him?
I think he didn't want to be.
It's so blatantly obvious. It's not a good setup for professionals as coaches in the NFL.
I think he wanted to be portrayed. He didn't want to be portrayed as the guy who fired 2 Super Bowl coaches, so quickly,
which makes sense.
Not which makes you look overreactionary. And it is. I mean, Doug won a Super Bowl. Nick got there. It's not easy to do. And to fire a coach so quickly after that, it's a bad look. It was a bad look with Doug. Then you go back to back. Then you start getting into that where people look at what's up with this guy. The impatience and all that kind of stuff. So I think, he failed to show. I think, and I'm not reporting this, but I think he wanted to fire Nick Sirianni, and that's why he didn't fire him. And while I would disagree with firing Nick Sirianni, and I said that at the time, I continue to say it. You'd also be firing the winningest coach in Eagles history from a percentage standpoint. So that's another thing that would be portrayed as overreactionary. So all of that factored into it, and he didn't show the courage of his convictions. It's his team, though. He should do what he wants to do. And if he thought it was time to move on, he should have moved on. The worst thing you can do is straddle the fence, and that's what he's doing. He straddled the fence. He created this weird little fiefdoms. You got Vic's little fiefdom on one side. You got Kellen Moore's little fiefdom on the other side. Yeah. They flat out admitted they don't even communicate in training camp. I don't think Vic communicates with anybody. I don't think he communicates with the head coach.
I think that's why he sits in the box up top, Johnny. He doesn't want to hear anybody.
He admitted he doesn't even, the Sean Desai's of the world, all his disciples who've gotten jobs, he admitted he doesn't even let them in on the secrets that have you bottom 5 in the NFL.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Hopefully those secrets start working a little bit better.
I don't think anybody talks to anybody. And I'm being a little bit, I'm not a little bit, I'm being facetious. I mean, I just saw Nick and Kevin Patullo and Kellen Moore, and they're always together. And I'm not trying to be that guy who's just saying bullshit. But what I say is the lack of communication is, does Nick Sirianni even have the power to overrule Kellen Moore in that type of situation?
Yeah, or does he even know what route they're going? Is there any communication between the two? I get Kellen.
Well, there's communication. I mean, he hears in the ear what the play call is. But by the way, he shouldn't overrule him because he's 1-0. It's the second game. You're 2 minutes
You got to inspire confidence in your
you're under 2 minutes away from going 2-0. So it would be ludicrous to overrule him at that point, number one. But what it does do is, by people talking about it, which I will acknowledge is a dumb talking point for that reason. But when people talk about it, it reveals the warts of the whole situation. Like in week 14, week 15, when it might be a more meaningful discussion, Nick has given Kellen Moore autonomy over the offense. Could he take it away if he wanted to take it away? I don't have that answer, but my thought would be no, because of Jeffrey. And that is the difference between there's really no difference between Nick Sirianni's been a CEO coach since week 9 of the 2021 season. So that hasn't changed. What's changed is he no longer game plans the offense, and he's given Kellen more autonomy of the offense. And then from a defensive side, he's an offensive coach, so he always leaned on Jonathan Gannon, and then unfortunately Sean Desai and Matt Patricia and those guys last year. But the thing that's changed on the defensive side is Vic doesn't seem to communicate with anybody. I talked to Devin White yesterday. Right. A couple of us did, and he's
really handled this well. I got to get.
He has really handled it well, and he's very honest and he's very truthful. Yeah. And he said, he was asked that has Vic, told you what you need to do to maybe get on the playing field. He was like, nah, nothing, zero, nothing, no feedback. So you start to see some of the cracks in the armor already.
Or a bad thing? I mean, I know that's an old school approach, but maybe that is part of the reason, why Vic has struggled to connect with the modern player.
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
Do you view specifically that instance with Devin White? Do you view that as an issue, or are you fine with the way Vic handled that?
He's not gonna play. I mean, I respect the way he's handled it. Barring injury, he's not gonna play. And look, you're not going to communicate the same with backups, deep backups, as the quarterback or the quarterback of the defense, which is now Nakobe Dean. Ironically, he was the quarterback of the defense. So, he went from the guys communicating with all the time to a guy who doesn't even dress on game days. So, that communication probably fell off the table.
I think great players, John, in this league, I think they want to be coached. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday with accountability. And you guys are right. You can't just, yap in a professional's ear. That's going to go in one ear and out the other when you do it too much. But I do think there's a way to do it. And I think you should be coaching your guys up. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But don't you think it would benefit Devin White, whether he picks it up or not, or whether he plays or not, from a respect standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, from a human element, Devin, this is what I want to see you do. Don't you think there should be more of that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Yeah. For that reason, one thing that strikes me about, and I just wrote about it, and got a lot of compliments for it, and I appreciate that. But I just wrote about Jeff Stoutland and Fred Johnson, and Jeff's approach of, he's coaching Fred Johnson like he coaches Lane Johnson.
Yeah.
And to the point where Fred said when he first got here and he was depressed and he was on the practice squad and he felt his career was going off the rails, and he would say, dude, just leave me alone. Let me play on the scout team and pick up my paycheck. And Stoutland's like, no, he sees something in him and he's trying to coach him up, and he's coaching him up like a starter.
Yeah, well,
yeah, I mean, that's the coach I want.
Yeah, and look, Cilio played at a high level. His coach was Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson was on the show a couple times, and Jimmy said, don't worry when I'm coaching you. Worry when I'm not coaching you anymore, because that's when I'm done with you.
Yeah, that's a good quote from Jimmy.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal quote. It was very good.
Yeah, that sums it up. And that's an example of Stoutland versus Fangio. He's not giving him any feedback. That tells you where he is.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
But you only got 53 of these guys on the 53-man roster, and obviously you have the practice squad guys and all that. And you should be doing it for all of them, as Stoutland did with Fred when he was a practice squad player. Yeah, and that sort of, unveils, and I think Vic's a great coach, but it sort of unveils some of the disconnect in Miami. Like Van Ginkel loves him.
Right.
Guys hated him, who weren't playing, because he probably didn't communicate with them either.
Yeah, right.
And there is the human nature aspect of it.
Yeah, no doubt. And you got to look yourself in the mirror, I think, if you're Vic. But sometimes older are stuck in their ways a little bit, and that's both good and bad. John, let's move in. I have some ideas or some thoughts about how I think we should discuss this defense. I don't want to criticize anymore. I want to figure out what's the best way for this defense to utilize the players they have in the pass rush. So we're going to talk about that a little bit coming up. I do want to get to our 2 super chats. We got a massive one from my man Chris. So we're going to get to that, but let me hit Martine first. Good morning, Zander and John. I watched the video from Bo Allen breaking down run fits and gaps. Just wanted to say run defense on the D-line is a tough business. Martine, I did see a couple comments now about the Bo Allen video. I have not caught it yet, but I'm definitely going to go back and watch it after the show. John, did you catch the Bo Allen breakdown?
I did not, but yeah, I mean, I'll try to look it up during one of the breaks, but yeah, I mean, Bo's right. It's not, and Bo used to be a nose tackle, so he was, one of the guys responsible for tying up. A little bit different in Jim Schwartz's defense than in Vic's, but still, he was a run defender, and it gets difficult in there. But and one of the things with the pass rush, and look, the Eagles haven't been successful on first and second down, and that means if it is third down, it's usually third and short, and that's not the time to rush the passer effectively.
Right.
So I think people are saying, "What's wrong with the pass rush?" Well, start with what's wrong with the run defense.
Exactly, because if you don't have a run defense, then you're never going to be in a good position with the pass rush.
Exactly. And, third and short is exactly what offense, because everything's on the table for the offense on third and short. On third and 13, obviously you can pin your ears back, and all of a sudden that's where you get the big numbers when it comes to pressures and sacks and all that.
And I think that's the biggest problem with Bryce Huff. I mean, the Eagles have given up more than 300 rushing yards in the first 2 weeks of the year. Bryce Huff's not been in position to go pin his ears back and go get the damn quarterback. Now, you could argue he doesn't look good on tape, even if he did have to do that. But let's start there. He was a good passer.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the great conundrums, because you can't just show up. I mean, he was playing in the NFL last year. It's not like he did it somewhere in the USFL or whatever, UFL. Sorry, United Football League people. He did it at the NFL level. And yeah, I think people too often put things in one perspective. And like when Gannon would say rush and cover and rush, and everything's intertwined, he's not bullshitting you. And run, being effective on first and second downs enables you to rush the passer. And if you're not effective on first and second downs, I guarantee you're not going to have a good pass rushing day. It's just the way it works. I mean, yeah. So I think a lot of people say, what's wrong with the pass rush? And I would start with the run defense, not putting the pass rush in pass rushing situations.
Appreciate the super chat there, Martine. I'm definitely going to catch that Bo Allen breakdown after. I think it was on Greenlight with Chris Long, his podcast. I think Kevin Savard just put that in the chat. So thank you. I'm going to check that out for sure. Appreciate the Superman. John, look at this. Chris AM checks in with a $50 super chat. My man, thank you for the support of the show and the channel. That is much love, and I can't really thank you enough. That's really dope of you to do that, Chris. So appreciate that, brother. He says, Zander, we got to keep our heads up, bro. Chris, I'm feeling better this morning about this team.
Mm-hmm.
I flushed it, Chris. I'm feeling better. You're right. We got to keep the heads up. He said, I have a lot of respect for you and J-Mac. The man speaks so much truth. John, I've been following you for many years. Mad love and respect to you. Silly doesn't come close. Good morning, everybody. Chris, appreciate the Superman. Appreciate your support of the channel and that very kind comment. So thank you, Chris. Appreciate you being here, brother. James Carver checks in with $5. If only played Kenny P at QB and DT as well as White at wide receiver and linebacker, we'd be the best team in the NFL. Levity to flush last week. No stop it needed. Good stuff, James Carver. Appreciate the super chats, everybody. So, John,
thanks to Chris. I don't get many compliments, so thanks, Chris.
Look at that, man. Chris with a big compliment there. So thank you, Chris. Appreciate that, dude. John, you
Yeah.
deserve more compliments. You do a good job
Well,
covering this.
people don't like truth, but that's fine. It's part of it.
Yes, yesterday I was a little upset. I thought you were caping for the team a little bit on me, but I think you were just being objective in the middle, and I was too far to the one side.
No, I never cape for the team. So, um, you know, in theory, but I do find, early season overreactions kind of silly. Um, and when I say I'm not caping for the owner, he's a guy who, in charge of everything. And generally, he's a very good owner. But I've said from pretty much from day one, this is a stupid setup. It is unfolding that way, and I'm not some kind of Nostradamus. It's obvious. It's a dumb setup, and it should be obvious to the owner. So if that's caping for the organization, so be it. But the head coach, I mean, that's just a part of it, and Nick knows it. I mean, quarterback as well, Jalen Hurts. I mean, those are the two guys who get
Right.
blamed for everything. He knows it. One of the things about Howie as a GM, probably what the Jalen Reagor pick was the crossroads for Howie, because that really wasn't a Howie pick. That was the scouting department wanted Jefferson. The coaching staff wanted Reagor, which at the time when they first said that, I said, okay, yeah, right. Because everybody does that. Oh, I wanted, the Eagles still talk about how they wanted Russell Wilson, blah, 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 which is toned down in recent years but Russell at his prime obviously was pretty good.
Well, yeah,
So it would have worked out well. Although Nick Foles is the only quarterback to win a Super Bowl, but I digress for the Philadelphia Eagles. That was sort of the demarcation line for Howie's like, well, I get so much shit and blame for this stuff. I might as well make the picks, full. So at that point, he was like, he'll listen to everybody, but he's going to make the final decision. And that's the way it should be. And if you're going to take the shit, you might as well be responsible for the decisions. The problem with Nick Sirianni, I don't think that's the case all the time. He still makes decisions, and it was his decision to hire Kellen Moore and give that I think that narrative is bullshit that he didn't hire the coordinators. But I do think he did it because he knew he would have been forced to do it. And he decided to take ownership of it. In other words, if it were completely up to him, he'd still be running the offense. But he knew if he went into Jeffrey's offense and said that, probably wouldn't be here. So he made a political decision. And I don't like the setup.
Setup is brutal. John's been saying that all summer. We're going to get to our first commercial break here, and then it's time to dive into New Orleans, everybody. We're going to dive into what the Eagles need to do to get back on track, really from a defensive standpoint. What does that have to look like? You're going up against really an offense that's working well right now under Clint Kubiak. So they dropped a 44 burger on Dallas, in Dallas. Obviously very playing good football right now. Alvin Kamara had 4 touchdowns in that game. Rashid Shaheed took the top off the defense a couple times. He played great. And then Chris Olave, he had, I think, 80-plus yards in that game as well. So they're working well over there in New Orleans right now. We got a tall task this weekend in a Sunday 1 p.m. game in New Orleans, a very tough place to play. So we're going to take our commercial break. We're going to come back and start to dive into that game. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Hit that like button. One more compliment for Johnny Mac before the break. Life with Trucker says J-Mac is the best covering the Eagles. No doubt, Life with Trucker. Appreciate the super chat there. John, any response for Trucker?
Yeah, I'm not used to it, so I apologize, but thank you. I appreciate that. It's nice to be appreciated. So I do. And hey, I always say, I'm very lucky to have the platform that I do, and I'm lucky that a lot of people listen to me and enjoy it, and I don't take that for granted.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. Appreciate you saying that. So good stuff. Everybody in the chat enjoying the show. John, the haters are always a little bit louder, but we have a strong Birds 365 faithful that loves the work here. So good stuff, everybody. Let's take our commercial break. It's time to dive into the New Orleans Saints versus Eagles Week 3 matchup. Coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.